Welcome everyone to today's event. My name is Sam. I am from Prospal. We're helping to put on today's live Q&A. Before we go any further, I would like to start by acknowledging and paying respect to the traditional custodians of the land. For me here in Melbourne, that is the Boon Wurrung and the Wurundjeri peoples. I'd also like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. But I might, without further ado, throw to Nick from Teach for Australia to do a bit of a quick introduction to Teach for Australia and a little bit more about our panelists here today. Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having us today. As Sam said, my name's Nick. I'm the recruitment team manager at Teach for Australia. And I went through the Teach for Australia program myself in 2014. And I'm joined by Ricky, who is a current associate in Alice Springs. This is his first year in the program. And I'm also joined by Mickey Tanner, who was in cohort 2016, I want to say. And I'll get them to introduce themselves shortly. But before I do, I'll just give a brief overview of the Teach for Australia program. And before we do that, let me just join Sam in acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to our earning members of the First Nations family on the call today. Okay, so Teach for Australia, what do we do? Well, in a nutshell, over 2 years, you will teach at a school serving a low socioeconomic community with full salary and benefits. You earn a Masters of Teaching, secondary in professional practice through ACU on an assisted scholarship, and you receive one-on-one coaching and mentoring to accelerate your personal, professional and academic growth. So you get a coach from Teach for Australia, you get an academic mentor from ACU and an in-school mentor on the school front as well. In terms of what we do, our vision is of an Australia where education gives every child, regardless of background, greater choice for their future. What we know is that students who grow up in certain postcodes have worse educational outcomes than their peers in more affluent suburbs, which is a crazy situation in a rich country like Australia. So in order to combat that, what we do is recruit Australia's future leaders into the classroom and inspire, connect and empower them to a lifetime of action towards educational equity. The pandemic has not been helpful for educational outcomes for Australian students. It's exacerbated the gap between the rich and the poor. Earlier last year, and this is just 3 months into the pandemic, 2 or 3 months, that gap was starting to manifest already. And the Nine Media reported a peer review report that found students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, Indigenous students, those with English as a second language and those with special learning needs and rural and remote students were at particular risk of losing out from remote learning. That's been fleshed out a little bit with further research, and they found that in Victoria, just as a result of that first lockdown that we went through last year, that caused a further 3 months gap in educational outcomes on top of the education gap that already existed. In terms of are you eligible for our program? You need to be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident at the time of applying for the program. You have to have at least a bachelor's degree in a discipline other than teaching by the end of this year. You have to be willing to accept a placement within one of our jurisdictions, and I'll get to that in a moment. And you need to be able to enrol in at least 2 learning areas, which is based on what your undergraduate degree is. So in terms of our role, what we do at Teach for Australia is we rigorously recruit Australia's top talent into teaching. We then partner with schools serving low socioeconomic communities all around Australia, and then we develop highly effective teachers and leaders, all in the service of improving student and school outcomes. And through that process, what we want to do is build a pipeline of leaders within schools to lead schools in an ongoing basis, but also to drive change and innovation in the education system. So what we want from our alumni is not necessarily to stay in schools, but to work in not-for-profits like what Mickey and I do. to work in government at the Department of Education, to work in politics, to go into corporate areas, to work in philanthropy, to help influence policy. This problem of educational equity requires a systemic solution. So in terms of the structure of the program, it starts in November with a 6-week residential training program. That's all about getting you ready for day one in the classroom. And I think Ricky will be well positioned to discuss how he felt about going into the classroom on day one. You then begin teaching in term 1 of 2022 for a 2-year period. And at the end of that, you earn your Masters of Teaching, which makes you a fully qualified teacher, able to teach anywhere in Australia, including primary, after you've graduated. So in cohort 2021, of which Ricky is a part, we have 171 associates who started teaching this year, and they're going to reach over 27,000 students during their two years in the LDP. I mentioned earlier that you have to be willing to accept a placement in one of our jurisdictions, and that's Tasmania, Victoria, South Australia, the Northern Territory, and Western Australia. We've got great hopes for New South Wales and Queensland, but at the moment, those 5 jurisdictions are the ones that we place in. %27% of our cohorts are joined directly from university, like what Mickey did, and 73% are young professionals or career changers, like Ricky. So in terms of how do you apply, and what I want to just note is that our round 1 applications close Sunday night on the 18th. We look for these 4 skills and 4 mindsets. So we look for people who have communication and influencing ability, leadership or leadership potential, organisation and planning ability, and problem solving. In terms of the mindsets, we want people who have learning and self-evaluation, who are able to reflect on their own performance, who have a commitment to the vision and mission of Teach for Australia, who understand the problem of the education gap in Australia and want to do something about it, who want to do something with purpose. We want people who are resilient and also who will go into schools and make allies and friends, people with humility, respect, and empathy. So in terms of the selection process, there's an online application which you will find on our website. Once you get through that step, there is an interview which is conducted virtually over Zoom, and then a selection day, which is a range of activities, such as a group activity and a sample teaching lesson. What we'll do now is take any questions that you might have. But let me first introduce Ricky Willis. Ricky is a current member of the program. So Ricky, over to you to introduce yourself, what you're doing and what led you to join the TFA program.
Sure thing. Thanks very much, Nick. Hey, I'm Ricky. As Nick said, I'm in the first year of the program. I'm a Year 7 Maths and Science teacher at Centralia Middle School in Alice Springs. In former life, I was a mechanical engineer. So I studied that at university and then worked as one designing power stations in Newcastle and Adelaide and Perth. And why I am in the program is because while I really enjoyed engineering and was good at it, I didn't find it to be fulfilling. I didn't really feel like I was having a positive impact on the world. And when I felt like I was very separated from the impact that I was having. And teaching is absolutely the opposite end of that spectrum, where I'm having definitely sure I'm making a positive impact, and that positive impact is like the students that I interact with every day. So yeah, stoked to take any questions you might have when the time comes. And yeah, especially because I'm right at the beginning and so very much in the trenches, so I can relate that experience to you if you're interested. Cheers, Nick.
And I'll introduce Mickey Tanner, who is a member of cohort 2016. Over to you, Mickey.
Thanks. So I am at the opposite end to Ricky, even though our names rhyme. It's a bit funny. I did the program in 2016, 2017, teaching similar set of subjects, so maths to years 7 to 9 in Hoppers Crossing in just west of Melbourne. My background was in maths. I came straight out of undergrad, straight into the program, and since has spent some time working as a management consultant, and now I'm actually back on staff. So I'm happy to answer questions about both the program itself, how I ended up in it, but also having come out of it and not be in the classroom, but still having something to do with TFA's vision and mission.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick, Ricky, and Mickey for that great introduction to TFA and yourselves as well. I reckon at this point we'll jump into the, this wasn't fun, but the fun part of the event where we ask it and answer questions. Now, for every one of the students on the call today, my suggestion is to start getting your questions in now, put them in the chat function, and then let us know whether or not you're happy to take yourself off mute and ask them yourself verbally, or if you prefer for me or Nick or someone to read them out for you. So if you put in the chat function, that'd be great as well. And if you had any questions, and you might have, I know some of you had emailed me in advance, just get them into the chat function as well, so everyone can see them and we can go through with that. But while we're waiting for those to start coming through, I might ask one myself. This is for anyone on the call, but I might start with Mickey because I can still see her on my screen. What is the most important piece of advice you'd give to students aspiring to work within Teach for Australia and within education more broadly?
Big question. I guess for the folks on this call, you're sort of looking to apply, like, TFA is an accelerated pathway into the classroom, and it's also a pathway that sees you enter sort of directly working with students and schools and communities that are in lower socioeconomic areas. I think that, as Ricky sort of alluded to, it's an awesome reason to be doing the program. At the same time, that comes with, I guess, just acknowledging that it is an accelerated pathway, and so you really are thrown into the deep end, but that comes with a lot of learning and personal development, as well as the day-to-day skills of being a teacher through the TFA program.
My biggest piece of advice is that about being a teacher in TFA is that teaching is fun. It's at its core deeply humanistic. You're dealing with students and kids, and they are funny. And I always say to people, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. And that's not to say there aren't challenges, because there definitely are. But at its core, it's you should have a smile on your face. Ricky, what have you learned in your first term?
Yeah, definitely agree that it's fun. And even like when it's a challenging day, that can be fun in its own way as well. I think, I don't know about like the single best piece of advice, but a piece of advice I'd give would be that teaching is a job where you really need to set a limit for how much of your like time and energy and soul you put into it, because you can always be doing more. And so I think having a really good, healthy relationship with yourself, and sort of just recognizing that like making time to like do the social stuff and take care of yourself and be really happy and healthy outside of work is also the best thing for the students, so that you're fully present when you are at work, and just nailing that like work-life balance is a very important thing to keep in mind, I'd say.
Awesome. Thanks you all. We've got some couple of questions coming in already. Bethany, you've got one here. Are you happy to take yourself off mute and ask that for the team?
Yes. Hello. Yes. So my question is just, so I understand that this course is an accelerated course essentially, and you've mentioned that you've got like the learning part that happens in like November onwards, and then like your placement starts in March. Once your placement starts, do you still have a chance to go back to like the learning, like any content or anything that's needed? Because I just feel like it's like super accelerated from November, and I feel like there's no way you'd be able to not that you're going to learn everything you need to know, but just like learn enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So the learning's front loaded, Bethany. So the 25% of the masters is done in that first 6 weeks, but then the learning happens simultaneously over the rest of the 2 years. So you're effectively working and studying at the same time. So all the course resources you have access to after the 6 weeks, but you are studying simultaneously over the rest of the 2 years. It's worth noting as well that our associates in the classroom are working 0.8. They have a 0.2 load in which to study their masters. Does that answer your question? Ricky can probably talk to the most recently to how that experience has actually been.
Yeah, I'd maybe just add in terms of it feeling very accelerated. In that first couple of months, there's like a giant bucket of tips and tricks and information and strategies that will kind of like be unloaded on you. That's really, really great and is like a bit more than you can process and act on. And then you continue studying throughout the 2 years. So I've like submitted an assignment every few weeks. I've got 2 due this Sunday. And those are really good because they sort of force you to go back and revisit all of that material and apply it to the problems that you're actually solving at the time. So I'd say rest assured that you will feel prepared enough like come day one when you're settling in the classroom, and then you'll continue improving thereafter as well.
Yep, cool. Thank you.
Cheers.
Got another question here from Sam. Great name. Can you tell me more about a typical day in life as a teacher? Maybe we'll start with Ricky, and then I'm not sure if Nick and Nikki want to add anything to it as well, but definitely start with the teacher on the call.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess the 2 parts of the program are you doing work and you're doing study. With the study, there's kind of 2 approaches that different people take. Some of them will like diligently do an hour of study every evening. Some of them, like me, will spend every other weekend binging the study and not think about it the rest of the time. Wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but it does affect like the day and the life stuff. So I'm a massive morning person. I really hate doing overtime in the evening. So I get up super early. I get to work at 7 and like do all my prep and stuff there, which again is needlessly early and is like a me thing. I wouldn't recommend it if that's not your jam. Teaching, I guess like an average sort of big day would be like I'm teaching 4 lessons and I have 1 free one, and that's probably a meeting. And then there's recess and lunch breaks, and there various combinations of trying to like go out and have positive interactions with students in the playground, or debriefing with teachers, or trying to stuff some food into your face. I personally try my hardest to like get out of there as soon as the bell goes at the end of the day, and I'm almost always really successful at that. And then just the rest of the day is for me, it's enjoying all of the incredible stuff that Springs has to offer. It's so good here. Those would be the main things. And then like when necessary on the weekends, I'll have a big study binge. And I've got to like structure in some other lesson prep, and there's marking and stuff like that. But that's like what a good, healthy, normal day looks like.
I've got a follow-up question actually. Because Ricky, you were at TFA before you actually became a teacher as well, if I remember that correctly. So you had a bit of experience of seeing what teachers were doing and things like that. Is there still anything that surprised you about your typical day when you started?
No, I wouldn't say that there are any gross surprises. One really good thing about teaching is there's the set contact hours, and that's like a bit of a sprint every day because I sort of always go during the day. But you have a lot of flexibility, sort of what you do outside of those hours. So I've been able to structure my day in a way that really, really suits me individually as a massive morning person. And like none of the other teachers in my school do it the way I do it, and they would hate to do it the way I do it, but it's like mine. And so the ability to just, customize things to really suit you individually is really great, and more than I expected. I would really encourage everyone to do that as well.
Awesome. Nick, did you?
Oh, I was just going to ask Nikki if she had a typical day, or was every day atypical?
Maybe to throw in, I mean, similar to Ricky, and noting that I think we're both teaching like the younger age group, so year 7, 8, 9. I think to echo the sort of, classes are really like energetic and, like Nick said, fun, and you're sort of really on for the sort of teaching periods. I think the other things to throw in the mix, things that you've like probably all remember from school, things like parent-teacher interviews and like parent conversations. So often dedicating a bit of time in a day, or not every day, but over a week, you might have a couple of parent contacts, which, yeah, again, sort of that positive interaction. The other thing is also like you're planning and working with the team at the school. So again, depending on the environment you're in, the maths department at my school is like 10, 12 people. And so a couple of days a week, there might be planning sessions to actually plan the content and make sure that we were being consistent across classes. And then, yeah, I think the only other thing maybe is just, again, stuff you might remember from school, like if you got involved in extracurricular activities like a lunchtime or like homework club after school, maybe not on your first day in your first week, but over the couple of years, those things might be added into your week.
Awesome. We might throw to Liv next. Liv, were you happy to ask that yourself, or did you want me to read that one out? I'll take silence as a Sam, please read that. That's all right. So the question is, so Liv is an exercise and sports scientist / exercise physiologist. Do you have is there any placements that would reflect that area? So for example, science and health, and maybe building off that, Nick or Mickey, you could give a bit of a description of what sort of degrees you're looking for across the board.
Yeah,
cover everyone.
So individual eligibility, Liv, is a little tricky, and we need to do a transcript assessment to just, because what you're eligible to teach is linked to your undergrad degree. So what I will do is suggest that you get in contact with one of our recruitment and advocacy managers. So I'm not sure where you base, Liv. Maybe you can just chuck it in the chat. If you go to the University of Melbourne or Monash or UTAS, you'd be contacting Melanie. If you go to a uni other than the University of Melbourne or Monash, contact Sarah. Queensland or NT, Carolina. If you're in the ACT, Emily's the person to contact. If you're in South Australia or New South Wales, you contact Taylor, or WA, you contact M. Yeah, Liv. So I just take down Emily Wise's email address at the very end there, and have a discussion, email her and have a discussion about what you might be eligible to teach based on your learning areas. What I generally say though is the most in-demand areas are sort of maths, physics, science, English, but we look at everything. We need teachers who teach humanities, legal, business, PE, food tech, geography, or visual arts, media, art, whatever it is, we need them all, with a particular emphasis on some of the STEM subjects.
Awesome. Dan, I might go to you next if that's all right. I think you said you're happy to take yourself off mute.
Yeah. Good day. Hey, I just was heard Ricky, I think last year, and he was really passionate. And yeah, I just wanted to know how you went, Ricky, particularly your first day, first class. I just wanted perhaps if you could share that experience and if it's been a good move. I assume that it is, but.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thanks for the question. Yeah, in general, like, so stoked with this decision. Alice is just amazing. I absolutely love living in Alice Springs. I've got a mad tan going. There's so much cool outdoor stuff to do. All of the people I've met have just been like really me kind of people, and it's just like overwhelmingly good. And teaching also is like the best and by far the most difficult thing I've ever done. Like having had some experience in other careers before. Maybe I'll elaborate on that in a sec. But first day was, I had the benefit where I'm just teaching year 7. So the way my school structures it is I only have 2 classes, like 2 groups of kids. I teach maths and science to both of them. And because they're all year sevens, it was like their first day at the school as well. And they're all coming from different primary schools. So they're all like tiny and nervous and shy and on their very best behavior. So the first couple of weeks was like relatively cruisy, and it was very, very easy for me to just, like pretend that I was an absolute expert and I've been doing this for years and they couldn't tell the difference, which is great. And things definitely got a lot more challenging with time. But the first day was, just played like getting to know you games, and it was a happy cried 3 times in the first week. It was really great. And yeah, in general, absolutely love teaching and very confident I'm going to continue doing it for a long time. I'd say the most challenging thing, before I started, I thought that like the behavior moments would be really challenging. But I mean, it's not really. It's like from a problem solving point of view, there's some stuff to do there, but like being sworn at or being told that someone hates you or someone storming out and kicking a bin, all that kind of like bad stuff. It doesn't actually affect me personally at all, except in the sense that it's like a problem to solve and a thing to improve on. And the biggest challenge has been, especially as a new person, and especially with all the self-reflection that TFA like drills into you, is every lesson that I teach, there's like 15 things that I can identify off the top of my head that I'm like, next time I can improve on that. And it's only possible for me to actually really give like 1 or maybe 2 of them the time and attention at a time. And so just making my peace with that, and it's like, it's okay, like I'm improving at an appropriate rate, everything's fine, and not like sort of like getting down about the fact that you already want to be amazing at something that you've just started. And I would also say all of the challenges, most of them that I've identified, like the more senior teachers are also struggling with as well. It's just kind of like existential stuff, like differentiation, that is hard for everybody. But I'd say that's been the biggest challenge, and just all of the interactions with the students are the best part of it. It's so good.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Ricky. I'm glad it worked out.
Cheers. Me too.
Speaking of challenges, Bethany, did you want to ask your question next?
Sure. Okay. So yeah, hi again. I've just got another question. Kind of like, if I were to go down this road of sort of applying to learn how to become a teacher, my biggest fear would be realizing that I might not be teaching the content in a way that makes sense to like the students, or that, like, yeah, as you know, like not all students are the same, so some might learn differently than others. And it's just sort of like how much support is given in that case if you just find that you can't make that connection with the students.
Nick probably has a formal slide about what's offered, but Bethany, I think there's a couple of things. Like, one is your peers within TFA. Maybe that's not support directly for the one student or the one class, but certainly for me, they were a really awesome resource. If you were ever struggling with how to teach something, or you needed resources, that's a pool of knowledge on top of sort of the formal like master's curriculum and training sessions. So I think that's one thing to consider. And then the other is the support that you get during the week to week of the school, or the day to day at school. And so in your school, you're assigned a school mentor who dedicates time to you and your development. So for me, my in-school mentor was like quite an experienced maths teacher. Really found that I could go to her if I ever had any questions. And then at the same time, we had a teaching and leadership advisor who was from TFA, who would come and observe classes. And then there's also just other staff at the school. So sort of like what Ricky was talking about, when you think about like behaviour management, that being a type of problem that generally the schools have pretty good structures around and can help you solve. But when it comes to content, I would say it's more the combination of, people in the school, but also the TFA sort of network around you. I don't know, Nick, is that still the support offered?
Yeah, absolutely. But Bethany, like to your question about making sense with students. It's actually, teacher clarity is really important, but it's a skill, and it's not a skill that you have necessarily straight away. Like I remember once I thought I'll teach this, I had to teach the students about AD and BC, like the year timeline, and I'd put aside 10 minutes to teach the students how to do this. And for whatever reason, I was explaining it horrifically. And it took about 2 lessons for me to finally work out a way to explain it to the students in a way that would actually make sense. The same thing happened when I was trying to teach a bunch of year 7s about the difference between the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. I just didn't do it particularly well. So in those situations, I have to go away and reflect on how to get more clear. I can talk to my peers, like Mickey said, my teaching and leadership advisor from TFA, senior staff at school. But I think it's one of those things where you're not going to be good at it straight away. You get better at it.
Okay, cool. So like, all right, so it's a skill you develop. That's good, I guess.
Yeah.
But the other teachers and your peers and that, are they all generally like, okay, if you've got a question on how the best, teach it and explain something, they're generally all pretty happy to help out and give their what works best for them and all of that?
Yeah, I can only, I mean, maybe Ricky and Mickey can jump in here too. I found my colleagues super supportive in that respect on what they've done that's worked before. You guys, how did you find it?
Yeah, same. I've been sort of constantly leaning on the staff in my school for support and advice, and like vice versa as well, in my own way. And yeah, they've been an amazing source of support. Always happy to help out. Yeah, and maybe just add, sort of echoing Nick's sentiment. You said in the message that that's kind of like your biggest fear. But also it's definitely something that will happen. You'll accidentally pitch a lesson too high, and that's fine. And I think that like all teachers still do that every now and again. And it's just a thing you'll like learn from and hone in. And I've found usually the class like as a whole will be really great at letting me know straight away if like the words I'm saying don't make sense. But also some students, if they don't feel confident with their ability, and that's like a shameful thing for them, that like they can be really, really good at hiding like how low their level at certain things can be. I had a moment in like week 6 with a student where I was like, oh, you can't read, right? Oh no. Yeah, so that's its own like bucket of challenges. But as a whole, yeah, like not quite pitching a lesson right happens, and students will let you know, and the staff will be very supportive.
I've got a question here from Sam again in terms of what was life like after teaching, directed specifically at you, Mickey, because I think you're saying management consulting, you were in there for a little while. Did the program help at all with what you were doing in there? Maybe you could explain a bit more about what you were doing as well.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, had my couple of years in the classroom at Hoppers, and then I joined Bain as an entry-level management consultant, so more of a like financial analyst sort of role. That's going back a bit to my maths sort of background at uni, so wanting to like try a different type of problem solving. I think there were lots of transferable skills, and I don't think that I necessarily thought that before just moving across. And so a couple of them, Bethany, to that discussion that we just had, one of them absolutely is the ability to explain things, not in a way that is like just telling someone, but bringing people along, figuring out what their understanding is when you go into a conversation, like going back to them afterwards and understanding, does it actually make sense, or are there still questions? So that sort of explaining comprehension skill helped me when I was working in a corporate job, because you run workshops and you run meetings, run all sorts of stuff where you need to know if people get things. And then I think the other one is sort of to what Ricky was talking about before in terms of your like how you see work and building in time outside of work. Like TFA as a program has that accelerated nature where you're balancing work and study. To be perfectly honest, I was 21 when I started. I was like, as soon as you could come out. And for me, the study was definitely a bit more comfortable, whereas the classroom and the work was much more new. And so I think just having that like personal development from having gone through, yeah, like learning really quickly and balancing quite a few things served me really well. And I think that's if you stay in teaching, if you go off and do something else, yeah, two really transferable skills.
I might build on that question as well. Maybe Nick, can you tell us a bit about your experience? Because I know, I remember you telling the last Q&A, I think you went from law into teaching, is that right? And now obviously into TFA. How'd you find that sort of journey?
Yeah, I studied law at uni and then became a lawyer for 2 years. And I never particularly grew up wanting to be a lawyer. Like, I don't think any kid gets out of bed and says, you know, I want to be a lawyer. And then I worked in television as a TV writer for 2 years as well. And I guess at the end of those 4 years professional experience, I was just looking for something a bit more purposeful to do. And when I was a lawyer, my assistant at the time, instead of becoming a lawyer, joined Teach for Australia in the very first cohort. And she told me about it and always stuck in my head. And it wasn't until 5 years later that I actually applied to do it. So I wish I did it 4 years earlier. But yeah, what I found was that, to my point earlier, it was just for me a more purposeful job and it was more fun. And I kind of felt like I was doing something with positive social capital as opposed to my previous career. So that they were the major differences for me. Plus, it was also nice from a credibility perspective to stand in front of a legal studies class and say, you know, I've been yelled at by a judge, or I've been on the set of a TV show, or what have you.
And moving from teaching into like Teach for Australia, more than non-for-profit space as well, have you found, similar to Mickey, a lot of transferable skills?
Yeah, 100%. I totally get what Mickey's saying about being able to do speak in a clear fashion in front of groups, to be a little bit more engaging. But I also think like some of the reflective skills that you learn, like teachers need to reflect all the time about how they will improve. Most of the time, if you're in a classroom, it's not like a normal job. You are the boss of that. You are the leader in that classroom. There's not someone like a boss telling you what to do. So you need to reflect on your own performance about how you can improve. And I find that practice of constant reflection has been really beneficial to me in my subsequent jobs, to go, how am I doing? Do I need to get feedback from this person? Do I need to, where do I need to get feedback from? How do I know if what I'm saying is accurate? Am I getting the results that I need? And that, yeah, and Ricky's probably finding it now as well, just that constant feedback loop to himself in order to drive improvement.
And maybe just to build on that quickly, I think when the question about what like a day in the life, like a day in the life, the first day, as Ricky would have experienced recently, is you being in a classroom with 15, 20, 25, like 12, 13-year-olds, and like they're all different people. And like they can all be a bit like mad sometimes and funny sometimes, and they go through their own emotions just like you do. And so if you think about a transferable skill just around working with people, like I don't mean to say that then I went to a corporate job and clients were like year sevens, but honestly, there are a lot of scenarios where you're doing the exact same set of skills where you're saying, okay, how's like Jane going today? Like, what happened at lunchtime that has meant that that corner of the classroom feels a bit like fuzzy? Like, what's this kid doing over here? Bobby, who I know really struggled in the last lesson. Like, you just apply all of that to, I don't know, corporate clients or whatever job, or Nick, the team that he manages now. Yeah, it's all just people skills.
It's also just small things like how to facilitate a discussion.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to facilitate a discussion in a group, you can't just have a discussion. You need to build certain skills to enable a discussion to take place. Then you need to execute it. So even something really basic like that, you benefit from having that teaching background.
I might throw to Dan next. Dan, did you want to take yourself off mute again?
Yeah, maybe this is for you, Sam. I was just wondering, you know, I understand there's a number of intakes over the year. You know, if you're in one of the early ones, do you find out earlier on that you've been accepted or that you're a likely candidate, or how does it work with the intakes? And
yeah, great question, Dan. The selection process takes about 6 to 8 weeks. So if you apply, the sooner you apply, the sooner you get your outcome. So there's 3 stages to it. There's the online application, then the interview, then the selection day. And to progress through each of those stages, like I said, about 6 weeks. So sooner you get your application in, sooner you find out. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, perfectly. Thank you.
Building on from that, Nick, can you tell us a little bit more about what Teach for Australia looks for in an application? Like what can students on the call do to really make sure they stand out and make it through to the next stage?
Yeah, so the questions are basically there's a few things that I would encourage people to do. One is that use the word count. So we have a word count on each question, and it's really good to use that word count, but also answer the question directly. Like questions are asked about the competencies that we look for. You don't need to try and put absolutely every experience you've ever had, or try and tick off every competency in the answer. Just answer the question that's asked, but answer it in a way that's full and gives us some context. So detail about the specifics of what the question is asking. And just like on some really basic points as well, like communication with students is really important. So we look for things like spelling and grammar. And we also, if you're like Ricky, have an engineering background, if you don't use jargon, for example, in the application, that we're not going to understand what it is. So yeah, they're my main tips, is just to answer the questions directly but in a way that gives us the context.
Is there anything I mean, you sort of already alluded to this anyway, is there anything they definitely shouldn't do? Has there been any shocking applications you've seen over the years that you can give people a bit of a, do not do this no matter what? Yeah,
well, Ricky can probably answer this as well. I think one sentence answers are not good. Things that haven't been proofread are pretty obvious. And also, we do ask questions about what you know about Teach for Australia and the education gap as well. So I think like the very least we can do is have a look at the website and educate themselves a little bit about the issue that what we're trying to solve. Do you have anything to add, Ricky?
Yeah, maybe just a tip I would add is just like the more specificity, the better. The questions are all like, the intention behind them is that like Teach for Australia wants to put you in a challenging scenario being the program, and they would like to see that you have the skills and strategies to like thrive in that scenario. So like sometimes people have had a tendency to just sort of say about the job, and it's like, I'm good at challenging scenarios because I was, CEO of BP or whatever. But that doesn't actually, I mean, that person didn't apply, but that doesn't actually tell them anything about like what you do in that scenario. So I just really encourage you all to like, this is a scenario and I did X and Y and Z and blah, 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 blah. Because to be honest, those kinds of like problem solving and coping strategies are pretty universal, and the kinds of things that you did to like design a piping system in an office are the same kinds of skills and approaches you're going to use like in the classroom setting as well, I'd say. So just be gratuitous with the specifics until you run out of word count.
For students that are successful and get through the application process, get an offer, what advice would you give them to help them survive and thrive in their first year? We sort of alluded to it across the call, I think, but there's anything specifically they should do to make sure they're getting the most out of their first couple of years teaching? And on the flip side of that, is there anything they shouldn't do? And I'm sure if Ricky, if you want to start, since you're currently experiencing the first year of teaching.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess one thing I'll just like encourage people to do would be like part of the opportunity of the program is you can use it as a way to go and live somewhere adventurous for at least a couple of years. And that can be like a pretty scary thing for a lot of people. But like if there's any way that your life situation can allow it, then I would just really, really encourage people to like be flexible to go and have the adventure. That's how I've ended up in Alice Springs, and it's freaking great. I'm so happy that I did. It's made it sort of like a really holistic lifestyle change for me. But yeah, just a super amazing opportunity to be somewhere that you might not otherwise be. In terms of like key advice, I'd say just having a good relationship with yourself, and really like I just like really focusing on your well-being stuff and having all of that in check. Like I was saying before, it's very like teaching is fairly self-directed to an extent, whereas like you can choose how much of your energy to put into it and how you use your time and all that kind of stuff. And it can be easy for people to sort of like put too much at the sacrifice of themselves. So I'd say just yeah, like knowing how to take care of yourself and taking care of yourself, and knowing all of the like the signs of like if you need to start changing how you're doing things, all that kind of stuff, so that you can be like happy and thriving during as well, to just get the most out of everything. I don't have a good answer for anything to super avoid just yet, but I'm gonna think on it while I throw it to Nick.
Yeah, what I found was that the people in my cohort are still some of my best mates today, and they were so good for me to get through the program. So I really leaned on my peers in the Teach for Australia program, certainly in that first year as well. And also I moved from Brisbane to Ararat, and if you don't know where Ararat is, it's 2.5 hours west of Melbourne. And I'd never lived in the country before, and I would advise anyone who's thinking about it. We ask for your placement preferences if you get into the program, right? So you can go metro, you can go regional. I'm so glad I went regional, and my advice is also always to like throw yourself into the community. Like I joined the cricket and the tennis club and started the debating team and all this sort of stuff, and it was just an amazing experience to get to know people in that local community. And I really like going to the cafe on a Saturday morning and seeing students and saying hello to their families and seeing them in the afternoon walking around town and things like that. So yeah, I always recommend that people throw themselves into the community. In terms of what not to do, don't burn yourself out. And that does require you to create some boundaries for yourself. What about you, Mickey?
Nothing major to add. Maybe on the things to avoid echoing the like not burning yourself out, and what that probably looks like is just not overcommitting in your first 6 months, like being prepared to say no, or to pick the 1 or 2 things that you're really going to focus on. There will always be a million things that you can do in both your personal and working life. So yeah, that in the first 6 months is something to look out for.
I've also thought of something not to do. And you won't have one. The placement process coming into the program is also like its own beast, and it can be a bit of like a nervous thing, like you're making this big lifestyle change and you're still not sure where you're going to be doing that. And Teach Australia will give you advice about how to navigate that, but also everybody else will, like your family, your friends, other associates, your neighbors, cousins, some person you run into at the supermarket are all somehow going to be experts at Teach Australia's placement process. And they're all going to give you advice, and all of that advice is going to be just utter garbage. So I just really encourage you to like just listen to what Teach Australia says about the placement process. They're probably going to like preach flexibility and that kind of stuff, and there'll be other voices in your ears like telling you stuff that's just going to make life more difficult and more stressful for yourself. So that's my extra well-being tip. Ignore the random stranger you run into at the supermarket.
I think all of you have mentioned stuff about like your peers in your Teach for Australia cohort. How does that work? Because obviously, are they training together initially in those first 6 weeks? Is there anything else that they do as a cohort together over that 2-year program?
Yeah, so there's that first 6 weeks together. Then you go have a mid-year intensive. So in the school holidays in June, I want to say, June or July, there's another week where you're all together within your regional jurisdiction. But yeah, it's great relationships form during that time. Even if you don't physically see people all the time, it's nevertheless a bonding experience, which I think most people who go through Teach for Australia would say that they've made some outstanding friends from the program.
Awesome. We've got about 5 or so minutes left, and I'm not sure if anyone's got any last questions, but if you do, make sure you jump them in now. Make sure you put them in the chat function or anything like that, and just let us know if you're happy to read them out. But I might throw to Nick. Actually, all 3 of you, I might get you to do a bit of in a couple of sentences. Can you? You've already talked about it throughout the day anyway, but like, can you tell us, a couple of sentences, why should they apply for Teach for Australia? We start with Nick.
Oh, look, people, it's a really simple one for me. It's that teaching through Teach for Australia is challenging and it's purposeful. So if people are wanting a career that combines challenge and combines purpose, it's a really good pathway that opens up a lot of other pathways for you. So I think that was the main differentiating factor for me. It's a real place for ambition to meet conscience. So that would be my answer to that. Mickey?
I think similar themes. Definitely eager to be challenged and be thrown in the deep end, but in a really exciting way. For me, one of the big things was also contributing to an issue that is close to home. So being part of community and being part of, I guess, something that, the educational inequity that does exist in Australia is vast and is not how it should be. And so becoming a part of that, whether you're in the classroom or move outside it, I think is just a great reason to be part of the TFA program.
Yeah, I would say teaching is incredible fun. I have a massive sense that I'm doing good for the world, and it's also incredibly challenging in a way that's making me grow as a person in ways that I wouldn't have expected before.
Awesome. I might leave it on one final, unless there's any other questions, I might leave it on one final inspiring question sort of end us with. Obviously, the educational gap is a massive issue globally, but in particular within Australia, which has got, as you said at the start, Nick, has gotten worse. How do you see it improving over the next 5 to 10 years or so? Is there anything that we need to do as a group, regardless of if you're teaching or not, to help to close that gap? And I'm not sure who wants to take that question at all. Anyone? Nice tricky one right at the end.
There's a really good line in The West Wing where President Bartlett said decisions are made by those who show up. And I think it's sort of similar in education, that the problem of the education gap won't solve itself. It does need a systemic solution, and it needs smart, dedicated people at all levels of society. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the classroom, but it starts in the classroom. So I think to the point earlier, this is a career where you can make a vast amount of difference. And it does require a critical mass of people and you're in it together. You're part of a team, and it's a joy to come to work to try to solve that.
Anything to add, Ricky or Mickey? No? Well, well put though, Nick. One last question from Dan, though, by the look of it. Dan, did you want to ask that yourself?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to ask. I've got friends studying teaching and gone through the traditional methods. Just wanted to know how you were received by, other graduates who are teaching, who have gone the traditional Masters of Secondary Education, and whereas versus the TFA approach.
I could have a swing at that since it's new for me.
Yeah.
My school's been super great, super supportive. All the teachers love that the program exists. I would say that schools opt into it, so all of the schools the TFA places in should be full of teachers that love that the program exists, and also you're not treated any differently. I'm just a new teacher to the school, and if I hadn't explicitly told people that I was there with TFA, I think barely any of them would have noticed by now that I'm any different to a regular new teacher, to be honest. So you very much do have your discretion and with students as well, how much you want to share about how long you've been teaching or how you're doing it as well. I don't know if it was different for you, Mickey or Nick.
No, pretty similar. My school had quite a lot of graduate teachers. It was a really big high school, and so more or less perceived by other teachers as one of them. It's the values that Nick talked about earlier around humility and empathy and being willing to learn, that's going to feed into how you fit into a staff group whenever you join a workforce. So I think those things just put you in good stead.
I had a slightly different experience. I was along with my two colleagues, were the first Teach for Australia intake at my particular school. So I think there was a fair bit of skepticism, and that was never verbalized. Everyone was super supportive, but I later discovered they were we don't know how this is going to go. But I certainly felt as one of the first TFA associates at the school that I had to make a good impression for the program. So it didn't affect the other staff being super supportive. I just think initially the onus was on me and my two colleagues to prove efficacy.
Awesome. Hope that answered your question there, Dan.
That was great. Thanks.
I think we might call it quits there. Right on 4 o'clock, at least Melbourne time for me. Perfect timing. And Nick, can you, in terms of anyone's got any last questions, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, so just thank you so much for the people who came. There were some really awesome questions, and on behalf of Mickey, Ricky, and Nikki over here, we thank you for coming. Like I said, contact the recruitment and advocacy manager in your home state if you would like to follow up for a personal conversation. Round 1 applications close on April 18, and we progressively close learning areas as we meet demand. So at the moment, no learning areas are closed, but they will after Sunday. So if you're thinking about it, I'd really recommend getting an application in pre-Sunday. But we do rolling recruitment through the year. But like I said, it's just we do shut them progressively. So soon is better. So yeah, thanks very much, Sam. Appreciate it.
Thanks to everyone. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Ricky. Thanks, Mickey. And thanks to all of our great questions. We'll call it quits there, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.